In this episode of ELT with Sarvi, I'm going to show you how that homework of mine, which I had turned from that boring worksheet into a more engaging project, turned out in the classroom. I figured maybe if I just make some changes, I can make them more interested in doing homework. Here I'm going to give you one example. This is the previous homework that I assigned to my students, and many of them actually failed to do it. I'm not saying that it's right, they need to feel responsible about their homework, but the new homework that I'm assigning looks like this. As you can see, instead of just making sentences with the words, they are going to make a kind of comic book with the new words, the new vocabulary items that they had learned in the new chapter of the story. You actually like this short video of mine very much. And here I'm going to give you some tips and show you some samples that you can use in your own classrooms while you're presenting the project to your students. Because what was really lacking in my lesson was having a nice sample to show my students and tell them how exactly they can make that comic book for themselves. So if you're using it in your own classroom, here are some samples that you can show your students. This one was one of the nicest ones. He has literally made a comic book. The story is actually very fun. I really like this story. This student of mine is really creative. It is about a boy that is licking an ice cream near a swimming pool and then falls into the pool. But then for some reason, he cannot come out because he doesn't know how to swim. And then another one comes and in order to save him, drinks all the water from the pool. And just imagine what he looks like after just drinking all of the water inside the pool. And then, he comes outside, he is saved, but then he remembers that he forgot his ice cream inside the pool, so he jumps inside again. And I think we need to wait for a second episode to see what happens to the boy. I think he dies. I'm not sure. I asked my student to make me the second episode of it. The part that was a little bit messy was that my student had forgotten completely that he had to use some of the vocabulary items that I had already presented them with. I mean, the whole purpose of doing this activity was for them to review those vocabulary items by making this comic book. But because this is the first time that I'm doing it in the classroom, just being able to gather some of those comic books from them, make some good samples is what is satisfying in the classroom right now. You need to adapt your expectations based on each classroom. From some of the classrooms, I had amazing comic books. From some of them, I had nothing. And today, with one of the classes, I brought all of these samples. I showed the samples to them. They were thinking, oh my God. So even one of my students, I think, told me that these people have no social time, teacher. I know, it sounds really rude, but usually my first reaction is that, don't you think that those people just feel more responsible about their homework? I start talking to them about the project. Having a students have homework is one of the hardest thing to do, especially at the school, especially with middle schoolers and high schoolers. So you need to reason with them all the time. You need to talk to them. You need to remind them all the time why you are doing what you're doing. You need to remind them why this homework could be useful for them. So that, and then don't give up. If they don't bring it this week, next week, the next week. Don't give up until you receive some from them. And try to do different techniques in the classroom. For me, one technique is to receive good ones from other classrooms. If I am teaching the same thing to another classroom, that's actually a privilege. That's a good thing happening. So I try to gather some other ones from some other classrooms and then show it to the classroom which is not that motivated so that they see how it can be done. Sometimes all they need is just a good example. And I'm going to show you another good example right here because one of them actually did it in form of doodling. I think she had used Canva in order to finish it. I'm going to show you right here. Take a look. Well, as you can see, this story is going to be about Stickman, like the character that we all know, which is really famous and lovely. Stickman goes to a cafe and starts with, "Hey, can I get a straw?" Of course you can. But then, unfortunately, they come and they arrest him for almost nothing. It's like, "You are arrested. You will go to jail because you're sneaking into other people's house." "But it was just a cafe," he says. It's too late. He ends up in jail. Then, in jail, he's like, "I didn't do anything. I ended up here. Why did they do this to me?" But then, his inmate, who is a famous outlaw, tells him, "Stop sobbing. We're gonna get out of here. Now, I have made a plan to escape, but it's for two people. It's a two-man job." So what happens is that they decide to steal a fork and cut the bars and get out of jail. And it works out. They cut off the bars, they get out of the jail, and while they were celebrating with some orange juice and God knows what the other juice is, maybe blueberry juice or something, oh, police officers come and they get arrested again, just because they somehow broke out of the jail. The end. So as you can see, this project is a very fun project for the time that we want to review vocabulary items. I know that unfortunately at some point you might see some students completely forgetting about the vocabulary items or not even able to put those words in the context of the story. This means that with that classroom, you might need to just do it step by step. Make them come up with the theme of their story, and then you can one by one, based on the theme of their story, ask them to add those words to the sentences that they have. And remember that grouping and categorizing the vocabulary items that you choose can also be really helpful when your students want to use them in their story. I mean, try to find like words that are relevant to each other. For me, because the theme of the book that I am reading with my students is mostly crime, well, most of the vocabulary items from that unit that I was choosing, like from the chapter, were related to robbing, crimes, and like punishments for the crimes. So most of my students have got stories about prison break, like escaping from the prison, committing a crime, and then ending up in prison or something. And this is, I think, one of the most beneficial, useful, student-friendly ways that you can make them use a context in order to learn some vocabulary items. Also, remember that being able to present their comic book, being able to present their story is another important factor here. Like if they can present it in a good way, then in the feedback that I am giving them, I'm gonna tell them that, "Oh, good, you got the points for the presentation." Having rubrics for these projects, that's a good approach. But for me, because I'm trying to avoid as much as scoring as possible, and my own goal, my own agenda is to try to make the students think about the results and the knowledge more than a scoring, I try to avoid rubrics as much as possible. But like I try to make them understand what their strengths and their weaknesses are when I'm giving them feedback. Here are some other examples. Alright, here is the end of the video. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I love you. Bye bye. Thank you.